The House will be in order. Prayer will be offered today by our guest chaplain, Reverend Cal Lamont, First and Calvary Presbyterian Church, Springfield, Missouri.
Let us pray. God, as you know, these walls have echoed with your name for centuries. You see, God, we know your name because we are your nation, your people. To prove it, we've printed your name on our dollar bills, chiseled your name into our granite walls everywhere in this city, and regularly include your name in prayers before Friday night high school football games. Therefore, since you are our God and the Prince of Peace, I ask you to quell the need in this room to dominate, degrade, and even denigrate. I ask you, God, the healer, to rub the salve of your Holy Spirit into our long-festering political wounds. I ask you, God, the Creator, to whisper new words, new possibilities, and new solutions up and down these aisles. Teach us, Lord. When we drop your name, we must also be ready to drop to our knees again and again and learn from you how to be one nation under God with liberty and justice for everyone. Amen.
The Chair has examined the Journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the Journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Langford.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Long, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the privileges we have as members of Congress is to have the leader of a church back home deliver the opening prayer for the United States House of Representatives. Today, I am proud to introduce America to a friend of mine, the Reverend Dr. Cal Lamont. Reverend Lamont is an ordained elder at First and Calvary Presbyterian Church in Springfield, Missouri, where he regularly preaches and teaches at a historic house of worship. He is the president of Executive Enrichment Incorporated, a corporate education and consulting firm assisting organizations to become more productive through effective leadership. He's also a writer and regularly contributes to the Society for Human Resources magazine, Employment Relations Today, and the opinion page of USA Today. Like many members of the clergy, the Reverend Cal Lamont is an important voice in our community. Reverend Lamont is and has been a tremendous spiritual influence on me and my family. He has a heart for his country and for each and every one of us. I am honored to welcome him here to Congress. I yield back.
Chair will entertain up to 5 further requests for 1-minute speeches from each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, today, February 3rd, is the American Heart Association's National Wear Red Day, which encourages people to help raise awareness and join the fight against heart disease, which is the leading killer of women. Now, I understand most men don't own a red suit, unless, of course, you were a keyboardist in an 80s hair band. But we all have shirts, we all have ties, accessories, and lapels by which we can show our support and go red for women. As sons, husbands, fathers, and friends, we can do no less for the women we owe everything, for the women we love, for the women whose loss would empty our hearts. Mr. Speaker, I encourage every American Go Red. I yield back.
For what purpose, the gentleman from Georgia rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, 100 years ago, Juliet Daisy Gordon Lowe organized the first Girl Scout troop in Savannah, Georgia. Daisy began with 18 girls in one troop in Savannah, but her movement has grown to include over 50 million American women over the past 100 years, including 3.2 million active members today. The Girl Scouts build character by engaging girls in community service, developing leadership skills, and preparing girls to take their place in the world. I know what I'm talking about because I have a twin sister, and she was a Girl Scout. I'm proud of the hard work of the girls and women who've been a part of the Girl Scouts movement, and I'm even more grateful for the positive influence this institution has had on millions of girls throughout America and the world. And so I congratulate the Girl Scouts on 100 great years, and I wish them every success for the next 100 years. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Oklahoma rise. Without objection.
Thank you. Our newest national unemployment numbers are in, 8.3%. It's progress, but it's 37 months above 8%. Makes me grateful again to be from Oklahoma. We have the 10th lowest unemployment rate in the country at around 6%. Forbes magazine listed my district as one of the happiest places to work in the country. Oklahoma is the #1 place to start a small business and #1 in technology job growth. In the last 8 years, Oklahoma City has created more than 80,000 new jobs. These jobs include a thriving energy, aviation, and biomedical center. Oklahomans work with private businesses, nonprofits, churches, and religious organizations to feed the hungry, help families get back on their feet after disasters, and offer job training and education. On this mission, we don't see Washington as our enemy. Just sometimes we don't see Washington as our ally. What so many people back home tell me they want from their federal government is a plan to reduce our debt, simplify our tax code, and get rid of the red tape off their business. Then you'll really see our economy take off. With that, I yield back.
For what purpose, the gentleman from Connecticut rise? Without objection.
Three years ago, this week, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act was signed into law, named after a true hero who was shortchanged by her employer for decades and fought back all the way to the Supreme Court. The Lilly Ledbetter Act ensured that women who are discriminated against have the right to sue as long as their unequal pay continues. This was a good first step, but we have to do more to achieve real pay equity in America. Today, women are still only paid 77 cents on the dollar as compared to men for the very same jobs. They lose out on between $400,000 and $2 million over a lifetime. This is an injustice. It is time to pass the Paycheck Fairness Act, already passed twice by this body. It would give real teeth to the Equal Pay Act. It has been almost 50 years since Congress passed the Equal Pay Act. It is time to ensure that one half of America's workforce is paid as fairly as the other half. I yield back.
For what purpose, the gentlewoman from New York rise? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I am proud to go red today and to honor our Girl Scouts. And we have a wonderful woman in our beautiful Hudson Valley from Wappingers Falls who is a former computer programmer and a current substitute teacher. And she wrote to me, "It broke my heart to hear that Kodak filed for bankruptcy. What is being done to keep the companies that are producing made-in-the-USA products here in the United States?" And Martha, that's a great question. And here's what we can do and what we're doing in the House of Representatives. We're working to make our tax code flatter and fairer. We're working to remove burdensome and unnecessary regulations. And we're working to take less from hardworking Americans like you so that we can spend and save and invest right here in our communities and in our country. And we've sent 30 bills to the Senate, 27 of which still sit unanswered. So this week in the House of Representatives, we're working further to shrink the federal government and to make our budget process have common sense the way you do in your own homes. I urge the Senate to join us to work together to revive our economy and make America open for business again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose, the gentleman from North Carolina rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in complete disgust of Republican conferees attempt to include an education requirement as a condition of receiving unemployment benefits. To require people who would otherwise be eligible for benefits to now either have a high school diploma or be enrolled in a GED program is discriminatory. It is despicable. Adding conditions to receiving compensation does nothing to create jobs or address the real causes of unemployment. It is a difficult time, Mr. Speaker, to be unemployed in America, but Republicans seem determined to make it even more difficult by kicking the unemployed while they are down. With less than a month to craft a long-term tax measure, I urge Republican conferees to stop obstructing the process by insisting on distracting proposals that are only meant to score political points. I am opposed to any education requirement to receive unemployment benefits. I implore my colleagues to do the same. I yield back.
For what purpose is the gentleman from Louisiana rise?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
The Gulf oil spill has been terrible for the Gulf Coast, but as bad as it has been, the federal government's moratorium on deep water drilling can be worse. Mr. Speaker, 18 months ago I had the honor to speak these words while offering a motion to immediately end President Obama's moratorium on deepwater drilling. Now, although the moratorium is officially ended, there is still a two-thirds cut in new permitting and an overall slowdown in production that has caused nearly one-half of the Gulf Coast oil and gas-focused businesses to reduce wages or lay off workers. These aren't the major oil and gas companies. These are small businesses who cannot move overseas. 41% are not turning a profit. 70% have had to draw from their savings accounts to meet operating expenses. The Gulf oil spill is a tragedy, but for workers, the moratorium has made it worse. For the sake of job creation, affordable domestic energy, and a stronger economy for all Americans, I call on the President to reverse these policies and to let the Gulf Coast get back to work. I yield back.
For what purpose is the gentleman from New York rise? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, you know, the reports have just come out a few minutes ago, and it's great news for America. 243,000 jobs were created in January, which is 150,000 more than were expected. The unemployment rate is down to 8.3% from 8.5%. So the programs are working. I congratulate President Obama and urge my Republican colleagues to pass a jobs bill so we can continue to have a downslide on unemployment. Now, I know Mitt Romney says he's not concerned about the very poor, but this is good news for all Americans, from the very poor to the middle class. So this Congress needs to work together with the President to pass a jobs bill and to make sure that unemployment keeps going down. But this is great news for all America. Great news for President Obama and great news for all of us. I yield back.
For what purpose, the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, throughout his campaign for the White House, the President made an empty promise to cut our deficit in half by the end of his first term. Earlier this week, the Congressional Budget Office announced its projection that the President's failed policies, sadly, have more than doubled the annual debt. Our debt has increased by almost $5 trillion over the last 3 years. This statistic shows that throughout the presidency of the current president, the president has recklessly spent the tax dollars of hardworking American families. The Wall Street Journal stated, quote, "To sum it all up, the CBO's facts plainly show that Mr. Obama has the worst fiscal record of any president in modern times. No one else even comes close," end of quote. At a time when Americans are searching for jobs, the President must follow through with this promise for the American people and work with both houses of Congress to stop Washington's out-of-control borrowing and spending. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism.
For what purpose, the gentleman from New York rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to celebrate and honor the centennial of our nation's Girl Scouts. For 100 years, the Girl Scout experience has enriched the lives of millions of girls and their families through innovative and progressive programming that embraces the rich diversity of communities across our country. A cornerstone of the Girl Scout movement, community service, allows girls to exercise their leadership skills on a variety of levels and at any age. Each year, thousands of service hours are provided to communities, cleaning parks, organizing food and toy drives, planting trees and clearing forest trails, tutoring young students in migrant camp summer schools, collecting basic essentials and backpacks for children entering foster care, sending school supplies to third world schools, visiting the elderly and helping deliver food to homebound citizens are just a few of the important activities that Girl Scouts do every day to make the world, our world, a better place. That is something from which each of us can and should learn. I would like to personally honor the Girl Scouts of Northeastern New York, which serves 12,000 girls and their families in a 15-county region. I look forward to dozens of these girls coming to visit Washington, D.C. in early June, where they will join others in song along the National Mall. From their individual efforts to hosting the Women of Distinction Award, thank you to our Girl Scouts and their leaders, and a very happy and healthy centennial celebration. With that, I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose, the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Rules Committee, I call up House Resolution 533 and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 107, House Resolution 533, resolved that upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider the conference report to accompany the bill, H.R. 658, to amend Title 49, United States Code, to authorize appropriations for the Federal Aviation Administration for fiscal years 2011 through 2014 to streamline programs, create efficiencies, reduce waste, and improve aviation safety and capacity, to provide stable funding for the national aviation system and for other purposes. All points of order against the conference report and against its consideration are waived. The conference report shall be considered as read. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the conference report to its adoption without intervening motion except 1 hour of debate, and 2, 1 motion to recommit if applicable.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Slaughter, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During the consideration of resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule and the underlying bill. House Resolution 533 provides for a standard rule for consideration of the conference report from H.R. 658, the FAA Modernization and Reform Act of 2012. According to the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, the United States aviation industry currently accounts for nearly 11 million jobs and contributes $1.3 trillion to the nation's gross domestic product. Regrettably, since September 30th, 2007, the FAA has operated under a series of short-term stopgap extensions. In fact, there have been 23 extensions of the FAA program since the last multi-year reauthorization was signed into law 8 years ago. I'm relieved that we have finally stopped playing politics and with the safety of our airline passengers and appear to be on the verge of passing a necessary, meaningful, and long-term FAA reauthorization. The FAA conference report provides responsible funding for FAA safety programs, air traffic control, funding for also the modernization efforts known as NextGen and operations through 2015. It holds spending to the fiscal year 2011 levels while providing $13.4 billion in projects that will create much-needed construction jobs. The conference report contains no earmarks. It does not raise taxes or passenger facility charges during this difficult economic time. While the passage of the reauthorization, the deployment of next-gen technologies to replace our current outdated ground-based air traffic control system will begin. NextGen will bring an estimated net of $281 billion benefit to the overall U.S. economy through decreased flight delays, reduced fuel use, and job opportunities for new high-tech companies. The House-Senate agreement will also improve aviation safety for passengers, reform antiquated programs that have become overly reliant on government subsidies, and establish a process to address outdated and obsolete air traffic control facilities, thereby saving taxpayers' dollars. Because we are finally passing a 4-year authorization, the conference report will provide a long-term certainty for the aviation industry and all who rely upon it. This certainty will produce an environment which allows the creation of high-paying and sustainable jobs, instead of wondering whether or not the next extension will squeeze by just before the expiration. Employees and job creators can budget, plan, and grow with confidence that government will not pull the rug out from under them. While I'm excited about the finally embrace the benefits of certainty and stability when it comes to our aviation system, I can't help but state what many Americans probably feel is obvious. This is how the system is supposed to work. Far too often, Congress jumps from crisis to crisis, many of which appear to this freshman member to be self-created. Far too often, because of the unwillingness of some to cooperate, we've been forced to wait until we're up against some kind of deadline that if we don't act, something else looms on the other side. This is no way to legislate. It's no way to govern. It certainly isn't the legislative process I learned in my 7th grade civics class. Instead, we should be striving to do our work as the Founding Fathers envisioned. They understood and anticipated that the House of Representatives and Senate would not always walk in lockstep agreement on every issue. On the second day of the first Congress, in April 7th, 1789, there was a conference committee appointed by the House and Senate, and they worked out their differences. And since that time, the House and Senate have formulated positions, each of which may be somewhat different, and yet conferees would be appointed to manage that chamber's position and to hash out differences and ultimately produce an agreement that both chambers could agree on. In my first year in Washington, however, it seemed that that's the exception much more than the rule. Much more often, one side takes a position and then on the other side they refuse to do the same, and there's a lack of any kind of compromise or cooperation. I'm not interested in assigning any blame on who or why that's taken place or why the process is the way it is. I do believe, though, cooperation makes a willing partner, and we can be that willing partner. Today is a good day because we have so much more work, but we got so much more work to do. I hope that today's process, as we see it, even though it's not the headline-getting opportunities that you see, a process is important. And to me, as the more we can push down the pyramid of power and spread out the base, let every member be a player, have a process that both House and Senate can work on and work with each other on and cooperate, the better the policy. If the process is broken, sure enough, the product's broken. If the process is good, as this process has been, then I guarantee you the unintended consequences that usually appear in bills that are pushed through in the dark of night are done away with, and we have an opportunity to do that today. So no one got everything they wanted, and yet this is a picture of how it ought to be. So, Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the rule and the underlying legislation and encourage my colleagues to vote yes on both of those measures, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from New York.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my friend from Florida for yielding me the customary time for 30 minutes and yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. After 23 short-term extensions, I'm glad that we have finally brought the long-term FAA authorization bill to the floor. 23 extensions are about 22 long. Unfortunately, the legislation also contains unnecessary language that would inject politics in what should otherwise be a clean bill to make the skies safer. Today's bill would change the requirements for unionization that have existed for more than 75 years. This politically driven legislation is being done unilaterally without consulting unions and the workers whom it will impact. During the 20th century, the rise of unions was quickly followed by the creation of the American middle class, the largest middle class on earth. And thanks to their safety protections, fair pay, and humane hours that were achieved by unionized labor, for all the rest of us who labor. The American worker didn't just hear about the American dream, they lived it. Meanwhile, the American corporations, including airlines, were rewarded with the best workers that the world had to offer. Over the years, a changing global economy and a deliberate effort to weaken unions has made life harder and harder for the middle class. In the aviation industry, airlines began to outsource repairs, often using counterfeit parts and even repairing airplanes in foreign countries, endangering our flying public. The unions fought these changes and tried to keep American workers in charge of protecting the American flying public. But over the objections of the unions, the airlines continued to outsource, sometimes resulting in very dangerous accidents. Today, it's more challenging than ever for a middle-class family to pay the rising medical bills, to put food on the table, and to afford a college education for the next generation. For so many families, the American dream has now become nothing more than a memory of times past. At a time when some of our nation's airlines are reporting record profits, nation workers are struggling to get by, I don't think we should be considering legislation that makes it harder for the middle class to survive. In state capitals and in the halls of Congress, the American worker has been under a sustained political attack. These attacks must not go undefended. For that reason, I cannot support this bill and ask for a no vote on the rule and the bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves the balance of her time. Gentleman from Florida.
Reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentlewoman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to my colleague from New York, Mr. Engel.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank my good friend, Mrs. Slaughter from New York, and I rise in strong opposition to the rule and to the bill. And I will continue to oppose all FAA reauthorizations because I strongly oppose the FAA's New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia airspace redesign plan, which includes rerouting at least 100 additional flights over Rockland County in my district, which I represent. While this bill will likely pass, I will not stop insisting that the FAA revise their ill-advised redesign plan for the airspace around New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. I've spoken to and written letters to the FAA and to Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood asking for reconsideration of the redesigned plan. I continue to be outraged at the decision to direct even more flights over my district. Talk about government arrogance. Talk about not even caring about the people they affect. Talk about not even having any kind of hearings within the affected areas, trying to sneak it through. Talk about having the person who approves it, overseeing the plan, is the original one who drew it, so he has a stake in it, and of course he's going to approve it. There are a number of alternatives to address flight delays without requiring the people of Rockland to bear the burden. As my constituents have noted to me, the noise and air pollution in the area will increase. It is unknown how this increase in air pollution will affect the disproportionate rate of childhood asthma in my district. I believe it's clear that this airspace redesign will result in a decline in the quality of life for my constituents in suburban Rockland County. And what for? The expected result of this ill-advised plan is a paltry reduction of delays, an average of only 3 minutes per flight. That's not good enough for the inconvenience it's going to cause my constituents. The modernization of our aviation system is necessary to bring it into the 21st century, to keep pace with the increased number of flights, and to also maintain our technological advancements by implementing new equipment to keep our system the safest in the world. While NextGen is important to upgrading our aviation system, it should not be exempt from environmental studies, which this bill makes it. I object to the provisions in this bill that grants such an exemption. And finally, I want to echo the words of the gentlewoman from New York, Mrs. Slaughter. I am also strongly opposed if it changes the bill, makes to the National Mediation Board. While the middle class is suffering in this country, we should not be making it harder for workers to exercise their right to engage in collective bargaining.
Unions are essential to improving the middle class and strengthening the wages and benefits of our workers. So I will continue to oppose the FAA reauthorization until the FAA halts and revises their deeply flawed airspace redesign plan, and I urge my colleagues to vote against the rule and against the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to let the House know and the Speaker know that this conference report was signed by all the Republicans and Democrats. There are a few people against this, but not many. It's a bipartisan effort. All the Democrats in the Senate signed the conference report. So I believe this is a great bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Reserves the balance of time. Gentlelady from New York.
May I inquire of my colleague? Oh, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to address the House.
Gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
I want to thank the gentlelady from New York for her courtesies of extending time on a bill that we have been waiting for a very long time. I was speaking as I was coming to the floor and thinking about whether or not we could work together in a bipartisan manner. I represent a number of airports generally, and specifically I represent Bush Intercontinental Airport, which has a reputation for being one of the top airports around the nation. A couple of months ago, we stood together with our airport director and workers, community, asking for a FAA authorization bill. We are in need of repairs, and we are in need of growth. And how exciting it is to know that this has been one of the best job growth months in our time, 243,000 jobs. We're on the right track, Mrs. Slaughter. And this bill would have certainly been on the right track. But why in the world do we put in this bill a poison pill that some say is a settlement, a resolve, that takes a configuration of counting that is absurd? For those who want to come together, as the First Amendment allows you to do, the right to assemble in unions and employee organizations, which to date has not harmed our airport industry. For those who want to come together, an absurd configuration of retirees and people who are not there are counted when you have an election to become a union. Just a day or two, or yesterday, the governor of Indiana signed a right to work. We have right-to-work states. We have recognized their existence. Whether we like them or not, they exist. Why can't unions have the right in a fair way to organize? And if any member had to go to the polls, I thank the gentlelady for her kindness. If any member, any governor had to go to the polls and work to bring people to the polls to vote in an election in a democratic process, and in that election they had to count the people who were home asleep in their bed, some who did not desire to vote. That was their democratic choice, although we want everyone to vote. Most people would say that is absurd, including my friends on the other side of the aisle. Why did this have to be the scourge in this particular legislation? Let me also say that as the ranking member on the Transportation Security Committee and formerly the chairperson, I believe in working together. We had a pilot program dealing with privatization in some small airports of the Transportation Security Administration. But the gentlelady is from New York, and if I recall, we were privatized on that fateful date of 9/11. The idea is to make our TSOs at a level that is responsible across the nation. And we had language in this bill that said that we may look at other requests for, or make decisions on other requests for using a privatization. No, they go and change the language. Now the secretary shall, she has to. And there is no credible evidence that suggests that the privatization of TSOs or Transportation Security Administration is going to make our nation safer. Why do we mix infrastructure work, getting our airports safer and credible and ready to expand, with these kinds of poison pill, in the box, in your eye initiatives? So, Mr. Speaker, I came to the floor to say that I am shouting for the fact that we have finally come together in what could be a way forward. But unfortunately, we've decided to use the poison pen strategy, divide but not conquer. We're going to fix this as we go forward. I ask my colleagues to vote against the rule. I yield back.
Gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have no other presenters, and so I would like to inform my colleague I'm ready to close. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from New York.
I am prepared to close. Very briefly, I just want to say that in closing, politically driven additions to today's legislation mar what would have otherwise been a clean and commendable funding bill for the FAA, and I deeply regret it. I regret that some have opted to take this important legislation and inject politics where it does not belong, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. Gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad that we're finally getting ready to provide certainty and stability to our aviation industry and those who depend on it for their livelihood and safe travel. The agreement reached between the House and Senate conferees is far from perfect, but I doubt everyone got everything they wanted. But it promises to improve air travel for passengers' comfort and safety while ensuring that a more modern air traffic control system. It keeps spending flat and is free of earmarks, tax increases, or any increase in passenger facility charges. It provides funding for airports, infrastructure projects that will spur much-needed construction jobs for an industry that has been hit particularly hard by the economic downturn. This conference report represents a step in the right direction. While long overdue, in this instance, the legislative process has finally worked and Congress stands ready to work the people's will. I ask my colleagues to join me in voting in favor of the rule and its passage, along with the underlying bill and its passage. I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
let's get the report of votes. Got no reason. Yeah, and we'll go to reading minutes.
For what purpose? For what purpose, the gentleman from Florida rise?
Call up the conference report H.R. 658, the FAA Modernization Reform Act of 2012.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 658, an act to amend Title 49, United States Code, to authorize appropriations for the Federal Aviation Administration for fiscal years 2011 through 2014 to streamline programs, create efficiencies, reduce waste, and improve aviation safety and capacity, to provide stable funding for the national aviation system and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 533, the conference report is considered read. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Micah, and the gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. Ray Hall, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, today I'm pleased to rise in support of the conference report for the FAA reauthorization. This is the FAA Modernization and Reform Act of 2012. First, I want to take a moment to thank Ranking Member Ray Hall, Chairman PETRI, Ranking Member Costello, as well as Chairman Rockefeller, Ranking Member Hutchinson, and the conferees who worked on this conference report and the underlying bill so that we could reach an agreement on this conference report and this bipartisan bill. Also want to thank with us this morning Mr. Hall, the Science and Technology Committee Chair, his ranking member, Mr. Levin, the Ways and Means Committee for their assistance, and other committees in Congress who had important parts and provided assistance to our Transportation and Infrastructure Committee to get this bill done. I must thank also the staff. Now, if I look a little bedraggled this morning, our staff is probably even more bedraggled. Almost all the members of the T&I committee stayed through a markup that ended at 2:49 a.m. this morning, and they're here bright and chipper this morning, and I appreciate all of the staff, and I want to particularly thank Holly Woodruff-Lyons, who's our staff director on the FAA subcommittee, Mr. Jim Kuhn, our staff director on the full committee, Amy Smith, Steineman-Smith, who's our policy director, Bailey Edwards, and I have to give special thanks to our legal counsel, who last night informed me she's resigning today. That was about 2 a.m. in the morning, but it was with good plans for her and her family and her future. She served the committee well. We'll miss her. It wasn't as a result of us staying up all night and working on this bill, but I'm sure that provided some incentive. People don't understand how our staff works. On this measure, our staff worked over the holidays, and I'm talking about through Christmas last year, a New Year's holiday. They worked on weekends, and they worked late into the night. So, not unlike many Americans, and they did this for many Americans who want to work, and that's what this legislation is about. This legislation deals with our entire American aviation industry. It sets all of the policy, all of the formulas, all of the major projects are outlined. This is the blueprint for the United States of America, and actually for anywhere between 8 and 11% of our entire economic activity. Aviation we take for granted, but 2/3 of all the people who fly in the world fly in the United States. And aviation has provided a magic carpet where today these members here will be here in an hour or two, Mr. Speaker, and in a few hours or several flights later they'll be home across the continent to the far reaches of the United States and our territories. That's the magic it provides. It's the engine that drives business and the economy for the United States. And this Congress failed to provide a reauthorization. I've only been the chair of this committee for a year now. I had the good fortune of being chairman of the subcommittee of aviation in 2001, and we wrote the last authorization, a 4-year bill in 2003 that expired in 2007, when the other side of the aisle had total control. For four years they had control of the House and the Senate, and for 2 years they had total control, House, Senate, White House. They could not pass a bill, a blueprint for the aviation industry. They passed 17 extensions, and the former FAA administrator said it's causing havoc. These extensions cost the taxpayer millions of dollars, and you can't run an agency that's responsible for so much of our economy with these hiccup extensions. Now, we've done a total of 23, probably more extension in the history of any other legislation that's come before this Congress for authorization of an activity within the government. 23, 17, I had to do 6. About 4, I got a little testy. I got tough, but I said enough is enough. I was tough, and I think I did get people to come to their senses and say that this isn't a Republican or a Democrat issue. This isn't a labor or a business issue. This is an issue about putting people to work and defining federal policy for one of the most important aspects of our economy. So, although it's tough, and I intend to be tough. Last night we stayed till 3 o'clock in the morning. We'll stay as long as it takes to get these measures done that are so important to drive the economic engine of America. The transportation legislation last night, historic reforms, and we took 90 amendments, I believe, from the other side in a very open process. And everyone had an opportunity to participate in both this FAA reauthorization in the historic legislation that we passed at 2:49 a.m. this morning. So no one has been denied the opportunity to participate. And it's amazing when you come together what you can get done, and the American people want that. They're tired of the bickering and they're tired of the fighting. Yes, we may have some heated discussions. Yes, we may have differences of opinion, but we got the job done. And so today is a historic day on 2 counts, 2 major accomplishments to pass a transportation bill, working again with members,
and I appreciate their work, and today, this historic conference report that finally sets a blueprint for aviation industry and an important aspect of our economy. This sets the policy for also taking us into the next generation of air travel. It's called Next Generation Air Traffic Control, so our planes can fly safer in the skies, so we have the ability to save fuel so that we can get from point to point and know where those aircraft are, both in the air and on the ground. This legislation sets that blueprint. So I'm very pleased to be here. I'm pleased for the American people because the Congress has done its work. They don't want excuses. They want results. And today is the day of results for one of the longest-term extended authorizations in the history of the United States Congress. So with those few remarks, and I'll have additional, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I had hoped for legislation today that would be laser-focused on creating jobs and making our aviation system safer, more efficient, and more accessible for our flying public. Instead, much of the drama over the FAA reauthorization for the last year, and there's been plenty of that drama, erupted over a provision of the House-passed bill that would have changed how the National Mediation Board, that is the NMB, counts votes in representation elections at airlines and railroads. Now let me be clear. As I stated in our perfunctory one single only conference meeting on this issue, that provision had no place. These labor provisions before the National Mediation Board have no place in FAA reauthorization because it has nothing to do with improving safety or creating jobs. Instead, it was a salvo aimed by the majority in this House at our American workers. Today, we have a conference report with a so-called compromise. But that compromise still changes how airline and railroad workers join unions. Now, some will say that this compromise is several degrees better than the original provision in the House bill. Nevertheless, I strongly oppose inclusion of this NMB provision in the pending legislation. On the other hand, I am pleased that the Conference Committee flat-out rejected the proposal of the original House-passed bill to sunset the Essential Air Service program. I was beginning to suspect that my Republican colleagues were confusing the EAS title of this bill with the ESA, which in my mind refers to the Endangered Species Act. The gentleman in the chair will know to which I refer. But this conference report will not make EAS an endangered species, fortunately. And the program will be continued with modest reforms to ensure that it remains a worthy investment. For communities in my home state of West Virginia, these airports are a vital lifeline and engine of economic growth that will be preserved. And this is what I reference when I refer to creating jobs. This legislation will improve safety and it will improve efficiency. It will create some jobs, though not enough in my view. While it does not slash FAA funding to 2008 levels, it could have authorized more investment in our nation's aviation infrastructure. On the journey to a 100% sustainable, efficient, accessible, and safe aviation system, this bill is just a wayport. Much more work is still ahead. But at least this legislation will set a course for the Federal Aviation Administration to follow in investing for the future and keeping the skies safe in the coming years. I do not want to see the FAA continue to limp along in the no man's land of serial extensions, to which the Chairman has already referred, 23 or 24 to this date. And I certainly do not want to see another shutdown of this agency, as we saw last August with innocent individuals being laid off of work. But I will watch closely how the NMB provision affects workers' bargaining rights and will be ready to act to correct any unfair imbalances if that becomes necessary. I reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just one housekeeping chore. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on the conference report to accompany H.R. 658.
Without objection.
I'd like to recognize the chair of the Aviation Subcommittee, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. PETRI, for 4 minutes.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As you and our other colleagues are happy to see this process coming to a conclusion. The successful conference report that we're debating today demonstrated our ability to take on important issues and still reach bicameral, bipartisan agreement on how to move our aviation industry forward, reform a critical government agency, and create jobs. This legislation will at long last provide stable funding and policy direction for the FAA's safety programs, airport development grants, next-gen efforts, and operations for budget years 2012 through 15. Legislation contains no earmarks and achieves savings for our taxpayers. This legislation includes many important aviation policy initiatives. I'm especially pleased with the reforms included in the legislation for the FAA's Next-Gen program. The conference report establishes timelines, performance metrics, and accountability for the Next-Gen program. Conference agreement also authorizes the FAA to streamline environmental reviews that often stall out efforts to increase the efficiency of our national airspace system. To be clear, the benefits of the Next-Gen program are not only felt by aviation users. The May 2011 DeLotte study showed a $281 billion net benefit to the U.S. economy if the Next-Gen program is implemented on time. So I'm pleased to move this legislation that will help the FAA's efforts to implement the important Next-Gen modernization program. By setting requirements and deadlines for FAA rules for the safe integration of unmanned aircraft systems, the conference report also unlocks the potential for private sector job creation here at home that has so far been stalled by government inaction. Along with advancements in the Next-Gen program, this legislation enacts policies that will foster sustained long-term job creation in our private sector, reaffirming the United States' leadership role in aerospace innovation and manufacturing. In addition to policy changes that help spur job creation, the legislation makes over $14 billion available for airport projects over the life of the bill. As the spring construction season nears, it's important to have the stable funding available for airport projects. The legislation gives airport managers the ability to plan and execute airport projects that will support thousands of construction jobs. This legislation also enacts protections to ensure airline passengers are treated properly and fairly in the event of travel delays. The bill makes reforms to the Essential Air Service program, eliminating federal subsidies in the most egregious circumstances as highlighted last year. Overall, the reforms included in the legislation will make the FAA work smarter, reduce its footprint, and deliver more. The final product will provide the kind of stability and job creation for America's aviation infrastructure that this Congress and the American people have been looking for. I strongly support this legislation, and before concluding, would like to acknowledge the very hard work of Holly Lyons and our General Counsel Bailey Edwards, as well as Giles Giovanizzi and Alex Barquette, who have helped negotiate with the Senate and bring this project to a successful conclusion. And I'd yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, at this point I'm very honored and in a nostalgia way, recognize the gentleman from Illinois, the former chairman of our subcommittee on aviation, the current ranking member. His taking his expertise and hopefully not his friendship and going elsewhere after this year, but he has been a very valued member of our committee, and his treasure chest of knowledge on this issue is boundless, and I'm just so happy and thankful that we've had Jerry Costello to represent us on this issue for so many years. Recognize him for as much time as he wants.
Gentleman from Illinois.